Imagine this. You're on a flight, cruising comfortably at 39,000 feet over the vast dark expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. It's late at night. Most passengers are asleep, and the only sound is the steady hum of the engines. Then, an alarm blares in the cockpit. A warning light flashes. The pilots, Captain Robert Piché and First Officer Dirk de Jager, stare at the instruments in disbelief. The fuel gauge is dropping, impossibly fast. This isn't a glitch. This is a nightmare unfolding in real time. This is the true story of Air Transat Flight 236. On August 24, 2001, an Airbus A330 was on its way from Toronto, Canada, to Lisbon, Portugal. A routine overnight flight carrying 293 passengers and 13 crew members. For the first 5 hours, everything was perfect. But deep within the right engine, a tiny, unseen component had failed. A fuel line, incorrectly installed during maintenance, had fractured. Jet fuel, the lifeblood of the aircraft, was spewing out into the night sky, invisible and unheard over the roar of the engines. In the cockpit, the situation escalated from confusing to critical. The pilots initially suspected a computer error. A massive fuel imbalance warning appeared, but the main tanks still showed plenty of fuel. Could the gauges be wrong? They followed procedure, attempting to balance the fuel by cross-feeding it from the left tank to the seemingly emptier right tank. But they were unknowingly feeding the fuel directly into the leak, accelerating the disaster. The precious fuel wasn't transferring. It was simply being dumped overboard. The terrifying truth dawned on them. The numbers weren't lying. They were hemorrhaging fuel, miles from any land, in the dead of night. Captain Piché declared a fuel emergency and made a decision. They had to divert. The closest possible landing spot was a small military airbase in the Azores, an isolated group of Portuguese islands. But it was still over 300 miles away. The question wasn't if they would run out of fuel, but when. Then, the inevitable happened. The right engine, starved of fuel, sputtered and died. The aircraft shuddered. The hum on one side was replaced by an eerie silence. The plane was now flying on a single engine, heavier and less maneuverable. Panic began to creep into the cabin as the lights flickered and the engine noise changed. The flight attendants, putting on brave faces, tried to calm the passengers, their training kicking into high gear for a scenario they never thought they'd face. 13 agonizing minutes later, the second engine flamed out. Complete, deafening silence descended upon the aircraft. All power was lost. The cockpit went dark. Backup instruments flickered on. And the Airbus A330, a massive, 200-ton piece of advanced machinery, became nothing more than a glider. 306 souls were now falling out of the sky, inside a metal tube, with no power. This is where the legend of Captain Robert Piché was born. With no engine thrust, his only control over the plane was through its aerodynamic surfaces. Powered by a small emergency turbine deployed into the airstream, he was now flying one of the world's largest gliders. Every second counted. Every decision was critical. He had to manage their descent perfectly, trading altitude for distance, stretching the glide as far as humanly and physically possible. Too steep, and they'd hit the water short of the islands. Too shallow, and they'd stall and drop like a stone. For 20 terrifying minutes, Piché and de Jager rode the wind. They were gliding for over 75 miles. An incredible feat of airmanship that shattered the previous gliding record for a commercial jet. Down in the cabin, it was chaos and prayer. The emergency oxygen masks dropped. The crew shouted instructions. Brace for impact. Heads down, stay down. Passengers wrote goodbye notes to their families. They were preparing to ditch in the Atlantic. But Piché wasn't giving up. Through the darkness, he spotted the lights of the runway on Lige's airbase. They were going to make it to land. But the ordeal wasn't over. With no engine power, he had no reverse thrusters and limited braking. He was coming in way too fast. He had only one shot to land this powerless giant. The plane slammed onto the runway, hard. The tires screeched, and several of them burst under the immense pressure and speed. The aircraft bounced, skidding violently down the concrete. But Piché wrestled with the controls, keeping it on the runway. Sparks flew as the wheel rims scraped against the asphalt. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the crippled Airbus ground to a halt. Just a few thousand feet from the end of the runway and the ocean beyond, emergency slides deployed. Passengers scrambled out, some with minor injuries from the hard landing and evacuation, but they were on solid ground. They were alive. Against all odds, every single one of the 306 people on board had survived. The investigation later confirmed a maintenance error was to blame. A hydraulic part was mistakenly installed on the fuel system, leading to the catastrophic leak. Air Transat Flight 236 became a textbook case in aviation schools worldwide. Not just for the maintenance failures that caused it, but for the incredible skill and calm under pressure that saved it. Captain Robert Piché, the pilot who turned a passenger jet into a glider, became a national hero. This story is a powerful reminder of the human element in aviation. In an age of automation and computers, it was the skill, instinct, and raw courage of a pilot that made the difference between a footnote in an accident report and one of the most miraculous survival stories in the history of flight. It's a story of how, even when the machines fail and all hope seems lost, the resilience of the human spirit can guide us through the darkest night. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as incredible as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of survival against the odds. We'll see you in the next video.